Hey guys, this is Dan with a quick screencast, just going over some of the functions of this program I've been working on. I'm calling Chimera. It's based around the concept of being a system administrator helper tool, helping you watch things like important file changes on your systems and run complicated but strung together workflows on your systems that allow you to chain output together, sort of like a Unix command line would with pipes and things like that, along with some other things like a quick note-taking app and a calendar for tracking issues. Let's look at servers real quick. The information here is pretty straightforward. The most important pieces are your name and your address. These plug into the other parts of the program pretty extensively. Other stuff is there for your own peace of mind, maybe the peace of mind of a manager, somebody like that. Basically, it's a bunch of inventory data, allowing you to track things like age, function, description, location, what switch and port it's plugged into, things like that, operating system. Some of these values are filled in. A lot of others need to be added. I'd like to have an entire 50 state drop down, but right now my current work only uses 2, so that's all I have in there. This is very development, again, alpha stage we're talking here. But everything you see that I'm about to show you does work as advertised, which is very nice so far. Files are basically a path reference to a particular server you have input in the system already. So it's important to note, don't even go in here and try to add files if you haven't added some servers first. The information about the ownership group mode, this stuff will all be preserved if you ever have to place the file on a remote server. And skipping ahead here real quick to the canonical value, if your file content is set to canonical, what that means is that anytime your remote content on a server changes, this content will be pushed out to take over, allowing you to enforce policy on things like your message of the day files, if you have to print a warning banner, something like that. In addition, there's a workflow tie-in. You could, for example, make your Apache configuration files canonical, and anytime a delta was detected, it would be tracked. We're going to get to that in a second. And a workflow could follow up behind it and run so that, say, your canonical files were the ones in question here, they would be pushed out to the remote server, then the workflow would run on the remote server to reload Apache. Let's see. The update interval indicates how often the file will be checked for deltas, for changes. If we click on edit here, you'll notice that we can change all the content here, update the content, set the interval. Right now I just have an hourly and a daily interval. I figure if you want to check a configuration file more than once a day, you probably shouldn't be managing it or watching it in the system anyway. So I figure that's reasonable for now. Here's your little workflow drop down if you want to tie a workflow to run if a delta is detected. And that's it for now on that. Let's go back. File deltas are essentially a reference to the file, the path and the server where the delta was detected, the time the delta was detected, and the size of the delta. This update here basically reflects the status of your canonical flag. If your file is canonical, then the remote content will be overwritten, and this will advise you as such. Now, to look at the deltas, they are basically unified diff output that can be piped through a patch program. No features in there right now in terms of reverting deltas, but I plan on getting there at some point. Tags are just a quick organizational feature. They allow you to group things like your servers, workflows, files, and notes together. You could create a single tag that incorporates a lot of things from a lot of different areas, but there are command line operations in the back that can understand what to do with these things. For workflows, for example, you could run a tag workflow that will essentially run all of your workflows on all of the servers associated with a particular tag. If you were to do some file operations, you could perform operations on the files associated with a tag, like getting them, placing them on the server, or generating deltas on them. Workflows break down into several different parts here. The basic concept is that you have a workflow object itself, which is little more than just a name, a description, and an enabled bit. If a workflow is not disabled, or not enabled rather, you will not be able to run it on the system. So this is good for developing things in a test phase where you want to ensure that no matter what happens, these do not get executed. The parts are the little pieces and scripts and programs that can help you make a workflow do what it needs to do. And now each one of these can take a certain action to run either on a remote server or the local server. Now keep in mind that there is no actual server ever that you see tied to a workflow. But this concept comes into the concept of tags and schedules that we'll get to in a minute. But this will basically decide where this part is supposed to run in a workflow process. You can run as a particular user. I'm not doing that here yet. But this should be working as long as you have the secure shell authentication in place. The pipe option here allows you to take the output from a previous stage and use it as input for this stage. Combined with local and remote execution, you could, for example, gather information from one server, printing a bunch of output, transform that on a second server, and then take that output transformed and put it into a database on a third server. Provided you had the parts in the background to support all of this, this chain of events and this piping of the input and the output could take place. Let's see, the stages essentially glue your parts together to a workflow and determine a numerical stage value for ordering the parts. So for example, at this workflow, email uptime to Dan has two stages, stage 10 and stage 20, and this indicates that stage 10 show uptime will run first, and then stage 20 email will run second. And the idea behind the email part is that it's a piped piece that will email me the output of what happens. In addition to that, we have the output, which shows you the standard in, standard out, and standard error of all the different little stage pieces that work here. This will give you a pretty good indication, hopefully, of what goes wrong when a workflow breaks, telling you which particular piece broke and why. Hopefully it'll help with troubleshooting. The output is paginated so that on a full-on production system where you're having lots of jobs run and lots of output, your system won't slow down too much. It's also searchable, so that you can only look at the output that has certain keywords in either the stage or the server, things like that. The schedules are a way that you can associate your workflow with particular servers, and you can have them repeat or run over and over again based upon different schedules. You have one time, which is obviously just a one-time run. It's important to note here that when this is detected in the schedule program, the schedule will run the workflow, but then this schedule value for one time will be switched to never. This enforces the one-time run approach, kind of basic. But again, the idea here is that you can select multiple servers or multiple workflows and save them and have multiple things happen across multiple servers with a potentially recurring schedule, or you can essentially have a scheduling object sitting here, never really run, but when you're ready to actually kick it off, you can update that very easily and change it. The Note app is extremely simple. It's just a title and a long block of text that you can add that you can use essentially for documentation purposes. This is searchable as well, so that you can look for specific note titles. There is no searching in the actual note body. I figure that's what your browser searches for. Again, not very featureful, but good enough to get off the ground. The calendar, this calendar is actually from a company or entity called 3Captus. It's an open source Django calendar. I've incorporated it to get the functionality in pretty quickly because I feel chronological tracking of issues can be very helpful in terms of solving things. So I find this to be a useful little add-on piece. That's it in a nutshell. If you have any interest in checking this out or helping with it, I could use some real HTML, Ajax-y kind of help would be great. Feel free to drop me a line at dghamilton1973 @gmail.com. Thanks a lot.